Well, we're so delighted to have you here, Lynn. Thank you so much for joining us. And for those of you who don't know, Lynn is an author of multiple books on this topic and the citizenship test and passing it and how to teach citizenship, and is nationally known for her work in this area, and joins us from Amherst, Massachusetts, where they've had a little bit of snow this week. So we're glad you were able to make it to your computer this morning. We're so glad to have you with us, Lynn. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's good to be with you. It's 0 degrees here in Massachusetts. Can you beat that?
We might actually in Minnesota, but
Well, first of all, I want to tell you something about people in Massachusetts. Um, I talked to a lot of teachers and librarians recently, and Minnesota just keeps coming up in our conversations. And you should know that people here see you, and we stand with you, and we send our love and our admiration. So let me tell you a little bit about me. Um, you're looking at where I work. This is the Jones Library on the corner of your screen. Uh, it's a medium-sized library in a medium-sized college town. And in 1985, I was hired to put together a volunteer tutor program for Cambodian refugees who had just arrived in the town and needed a lot of help really fast. So we trained tutors and we placed them and we helped them to learn English and figure out how things worked here. But the one thing that we did have some trouble with was citizenship. The the students really wanted to become citizens because they had family members in very dangerous places and they could sponsor them if they became US citizens. But I couldn't find any materials that were anything close to the the reading level of these students, as well as the language proficiency levels. And many of them didn't have formal education. So even if you could translate materials, they didn't really understand them. So I ended up putting materials together for my own students, and they became the New Readers Press books that you see today. Um, one more thing about my program, we work with students until we're sure that they're ready to pass the test. And from the time we started until now, we've had a 100% pass rate. We won't let students fail. So today I want to give you some specifics on the 2025 test changes and how they're likely to impact students. And then I'll share with you a set of strategies that I've developed over the years to help students, especially the beginners, to understand, remember, and produce answers to more challenging civics questions. There are three parts to the citizenship test: speaking, literacy, and civics. The speaking test is basically it's the interview where they go over your N400 application, um, updated if necessary, um, and in the course of the interview, just asking questions about people's personal background, they decide whether or not that applicant can use and understand words and phrases in ordinary language. That is the standard they're supposed to use. This has not changed. And I'm not going to do a commercial for my textbook series, but just so that you know, that red book over there is specifically for preparing students for the interview. The literacy test is the examiner asks the applicant to read one sentence aloud and to write one sentence as a dictation. And it's based on 90 some words that are public. Students can study them. And most students are already familiar with vocabulary on the literacy test, but for those students who are really beginning literacy levels or don't even have any literacy, you're going to want to use that blue book there, the literacy skills workbook. It's a good place to start. The third part of the test is the civics part. This is where examiners ask questions orally about history and government, and applicants answer them orally. The civics part of the test is the only part that is changing, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And that white book there is It covers everything on the civics and the literacy test. So if students study that book, they should be able to pass the test. And there is a teacher's guide for all of them. By the way, if you see on the lower right side of your screen, Voices of Freedom, the Pearson textbook that's intended for higher level students, is going to come out in a new edition in a month or two. The format of the civics test has not changed. It's still an oral open response format. There was some talk a few years ago of moving to a computer-based written test, but that's been tabled for now. The length of the civics test has expanded. The list of study questions went from 100 to 128. The examiner will now ask 20 questions instead of 10, and students need to answer 12 correctly to pass. Once they get 12 right, the civics part of the test is over. In terms of the content, the test still follows the same general topics of history and government, but the geography questions have been eliminated, and that's really sad because those were the easiest ones to teach. Some questions from the old test have been dropped, some remain the same, some have been rephrased, and many new questions have been added. The conceptual level is higher than before. Some questions appear to me to be appropriate for secondary or even college level tests. The language level is higher too. It incorporates more complex vocabulary and linguistic structures than before. And in some cases, students have to memorize some rather long phrases to answer a question. So the bottom line is yes, the test has gotten harder. Will students be able to pass the test? The good news is that most of them will, though they'll have to master more content, and that will require more instructional hours. The bad news is that the at-risk students, the ones at the beginning proficiency levels, beginning literacy levels, those with limited formal education, and older students, they're going to be adversely affected. Not all of them will be able to pass this new test, but I think some beginners will have a fair chance if we adjust our teaching strategies to help them. I'm not giving up on the beginners, and you shouldn't either. If you really want to be effective under the new circumstances, you're going to have to pull out all the stops and do whatever it takes. So this is fair warning. In this presentation, I'm going to be showing you some strategies that maybe you never thought you'd need. As teachers, we want students to understand the history and government concepts. And if they do, it'll make it easier for them to remember the answers. But we need to be honest. Some students will not understand 100% of what we teach. Some of them have always gotten through primarily through memorization. I think each student is on a continuum between these two possibilities, and every class has some students who lean one way and some who lean the other. As the test gets more difficult, I'm afraid that more students will be shifting over to the memorizing end of that continuum. But I refuse to let those students fail. My approach is to explain the concepts, but recognize that not every student will understand everything I teach. I supplement instruction with extra support for students who rely heavily on memorization. And to do that, I need to bring in some new strategies. I'm teaching to both sides of the continuum, fostering comprehension and boosting memory skills. And I'm going to start with the left side of this image, the strategies for boosting comprehension. Tip number one, more is not better. Students can only remember so much information at one time, especially when they're feeling nervous about this test. It's important to limit how much content you throw at them. It's good for them to know what a question is and why the correct answer is correct. But it's not necessary for them to get a detailed background on the topic. If some students in the class want to know more, there are lots of resources you can share with them where they can explore the more detailed information independently. If you do give more information than what's actually on the test, make sure that it's clear what they need to remember and what they don't need to remember. The more you throw at them, uh, the lower their confidence goes. So this is something to be very careful about. You can see this, there's a booklet that they used to give to students at their fingerprint interviews. I remember this booklet because it drove me crazy. It gave them the questions and the answers to study, but then it gave them long passages to explain why the answer is the answer and to give them more background on the topic. And my students thought that they had to memorize all of that information that they couldn't even read. So I tried to get it out of their hands as fast as I could. But it's just an example of what you don't want to do to students. Now, there's a test question that asks people to name five of the original states. And of course, there's 13 possible answers to that question. Do the students need to memorize 13 answers? No, they need five. So the easiest five to remember and say, and that's all that I teach. My number one strategy for supporting comprehension is using visuals like document replicas and photos. So, like, for example, when I'm teaching the Declaration of Independence, I pull out this sort of yellowed fake parchment paper. And the students, they can't really read what's on there, but somehow that helps to contextualize it for students. If I can point to something as I'm talking about it, somehow it makes the information stick a little bit better. Students have to learn the names of their governor, their senator, their representative. When I teach names, I give them an image of that person. This makes it more concrete. And they may have seen this person's face before in the news, for example. So you're building on a little bit of prior knowledge. Maps, globes, they can provide some context for what you're teaching, and pictures can help you explain historical events and leave an image in students' heads. I like to show them a picture at the beginning of a lesson and ask, what do you see? And I can get more detailed. What's happening? Who are these people? Is this happening in the past or is it happening now? Or what year do you think this is? Why is it happening? And what's going to happen next? Another important strategy to support comprehension is to draw connections to students' lives. When you want to introduce concepts like the US Capitol, the flag, the form of government, the leader of the US, you can start by asking about the students' home countries. There's a new question about the US motto, E pluribus unum, and what that means. Can you believe that we are teaching Latin now in our ESL classes? So what I do is I have students pull out their money. They've got money in their pocket, and every single piece of it has that E pluribus unum on it. So that's a way of like connecting it to their everyday lives, and they can look at those letters and you tell them what they mean. When I talk about national holidays, I ask whether they get that day off or whether the kids are home from school on that particular day and why. Why are post offices and banks closed? It's something that they do experience in their everyday lives, and they may be able to tell you a little bit about the reason for the holiday. That's prior knowledge that you can build on then in your lesson. When you get topics like religious freedom, colonization, discrimination, civil war, well, I ask students about their own experiences with these things here or in their countries, and they may know a thing or two about these topics. You can build on that to explain the concepts in US history and government. When you get to topics um, that are very abstract, especially vocabulary, um, there are some tricks you can use to explain abstract words. For example, there are a couple questions that involve the word loyalty. Um, and when they take the oath of allegiance, they have to promise that they will be loyal to their country. Examiners actually will ask about this. And the way that I explain loyalty is by telling stories and giving examples. I use a dog as an example, what my dog does that shows that she's loyal. And what would a dog do if that dog wasn't loyal? You can have that same conversation about spouses, actually. And then you can talk about US citizens. What does a loyal citizen do? And what does a disloyal citizen do? Examiners do this by asking, um, if there were a war between your home country and the United States, which side would you be fighting on? they actually ask that question. Although students will take the test in English, allowing them to hear or read unfamiliar vocabulary and concepts in their own language will save you and them a lot of time. If they already understand the concepts in their home language, you can shift from clarifying ideas to practicing new vocabulary in English. Many students are familiar with apps like Google Translate, and I think allowing them to use these apps in class while you're explaining difficult material is to everybody's advantage. The same is true for bilingual instruction or the use of bilingual teaching assistants in the classroom. I print out question and answer lists in students' language, and I want to give a shout out to USA Hello. Their website has the new questions in 18 languages. Later, when you get into the practice and review phase, you're going to need to get students to switch back to English only mode because at that point, they need to get accustomed to performing without translation. There's one thing about translation you need to keep in mind. Not all students are going to be familiar with certain concepts of history and government, even in their own language. Students who have limited formal education may still be confused about terms like constitutional amendments or civil rights movement, even if you provide translation. And with written translation, remember, just because students speak a language doesn't guarantee that they can read it proficiently. Unfortunately, unless you can provide some kind of supplemental instruction, these students don't have much choice but to rely on rote memorization without fully understanding the answers. There's a lot that I could tell you about strategies for supporting comprehension, but here's one last tip. Save yourself some time. If you get a teacher's guide, it'll provide you with strategies for every page of the book that you're using. Now I want to talk about the other side of that continuum. How do we make it easier for students to remember the answers? Well, first we can find ways to reduce the cognitive load by making things short and simple as possible and using some clever little shortcuts I'm going to show you. We can also use certain patterns in the questions and answers to our advantage. And I'm going to suggest some ways to use mnemonic devices. Let me ask you a question. Is it easier for you to remember the alphabet as a spoken string of letters or as a song? I'm guessing you're going to say the song. When you learned that song, you were probably 2 or 3 years old, and to you, it was just a bunch of nonsense syllables. You didn't know what those letters meant or what they were for, but you learned them so effectively that they became firmly stuck in your head, and now you can't forget them if you tried, right? Well, that's an example of a very effective mnemonic device, specifically musical mnemonics. It leverages rhythm, rhyme, and melody to foster memory retention through repetition and by engaging several of our senses at once. When we sing, we're dual coding. We're processing words both verbally and melodically. We're using separate brain systems for richer encoding. When I sing songs with students, I know some of them are going to sing along for the fun of it, and some of them are just going to look at their feet. And I don't really care. The point is, whether they're singing or just listening, their brains are getting programmed with vocabulary and civics facts. And once they learn that song, they can go home and sing it to themselves. I see it like a piggy bank. Each time they sing or just hear the words, it's making that memory stronger, making it stick a little better. And after a while, it'll become a brainworm, one of those songs that they can't get out of their heads. The scientific way to say this is each repetition reinforces memory trace, moving it into long-term storage. Has anybody on the webinar today ever used songs in your citizenship classes? If you have, put an example of a song you've sung with your students in the chat. The songs that I teach recite basic civics facts using simple, familiar melodies. I'm going to give you 3 quick examples. Remember those 5 states the students have to name? New York, New Jersey, New Hampshire, New York, New Jersey, New Hampshire, and also North Carolina and South Carolina too. And remember that question about e pluribus unum on the students' money? Here's how I help them remember it. It means out of many one. It means out of many one. What does e pluribus unum mean? It means out of many one. The first question on the official list of citizenship questions to study is what is the form of government of the United States? So we sing, the U.S. is a republic, the U.S. is a republic, the U.S. is a republic. It means we don't have a king. I've been making audio files that teachers can use as a reference if they want to try this. If you go to joneslibrary.org/songs, you'll find recordings of me and my very amateur voice singing songs to go with the 128 questions. I'm going to keep adding recordings over the next few weeks so you can keep on checking that page. The words for the songs will also appear in the new edition of the Teacher's Guide, which is coming out this spring. And Patsy or Christy, did we get any songs in the chat?
People are loving this idea. I didn't see that they're doing any of their own songs yet, but maybe it'll come. And then, Christy, thanks for dropping that link. If you don't have your chat box open, Christy has dropped the link to that library of songs there for you.
Okay, I know my voice is pretty ordinary, and maybe so is yours, but this is not American Idol. If I can take the sleep, you can too. And I can already hear some of you saying, but I'm a teacher, I'm not a singer. Take the example of the preschool and primary teachers. The best of them sing with their students, and they don't worry about whether they have perfect pitch. Students don't really care because they don't have perfect pitch either. When my students sing along with me, well, frankly, we probably sound awful. And we have a good laugh together, and that coin goes into the piggy bank just the same. Here are a few tips for teaching songs. Write the words on cue cards ahead of time or write them on the board so that you can point to each word as you sing it. Take a deep breath and just launch in. Sing it slowly the first time, then sing it at a moderate pace. Encourage students to sing along, but be prepared for them to be shy about it. Don't worry about whether they're singing or they're not. Just keep going. Have fun with it. Don't take yourself too seriously. Repeat the song several times. Review it in the next class. Let students take a picture of the words on the board or copy the words into the notebook so they can practice at home. And if you want, you can record it and share audio files like I've been doing. Or you could just give them the link to the ones that I've put up for my students here at Jones Library. Check out this test question. What amendment says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are US citizens? I bet you that less than 1 out of 100 Americans could answer that question. I think that after they hear the first 5 words, a lot of students have reached their limit in terms of auditory processing, and they can't even register the rest of the question. So how can we help students with questions that use extremely complex phrasing like this? My solution is to use what I call a keyword. And I mean a word or a pair of words that do not appear in any other question. In this question, the key I use is all persons. I teach students that if they hear all persons in the question, the answer is 14th Amendment. If students know this trick, then whether or not they fully understand the question, and even if they're so nervous at the interview that their brain freezes up, as long as they hear the word, they've got the answer. Is that cheating? I don't care. The new test is big on constitutional amendments. Here are more questions that involve amendments. Where there are several answer choices for a question, my prediction is the number will be the easiest one to memorize. You know, students do manage to memorize numbers all the time. Their phone numbers, zip codes, passwords. I think with some practice, they'll be able to remember some numbers for this test. So I'm suggesting that you help students link keywords in the question with numbers in the answer. You explain the Constitution and the specific amendments as best you can. And then when you do question and answer drills, practice these amendment questions together. I'm also suggesting that teachers keep a chart on the wall to help students remember keywords linked to numbers. And that last number, there's another little trick in there. 2 terms for the president, 22nd Amendment. It's all twos. Here's a question with some rather complex answer choices. Which answer do you think I'm going to pick? If you guessed the number, you're right. I suggest using the name of the president, Eisenhower, as the keyword because it's the only question about him, and linking it to the order of his presidency, 34th president. I'm also suggesting that you ignore the last four words there. If I answer that question simply by saying the 34th president, you can't challenge it as being incorrect. This strategy will work with five of the questions about presidents, so you can post a president's chart on your classroom wall, and students may want to carry a president's crib sheet in their pocket and practice it every day. So they're linking the name of the president to the order of that president. And by the way, the literacy test involves a dictated sentence. Adams was the second president. So you can add that to your president chart if you want. Another strategy that I'm using is to cluster together questions that have the same answer. For example, I'm encouraging teachers to practice these three questions together because the answer is pretty much the same. In the case of the second and third question, I don't think students need to learn the whole phrase to stop the spread of communism. In all fairness, if they say communism or to stop communism, the answer is still factually correct. There are a few other sets of answers that are found in multiple questions, so you can draw these questions as a group too. What's the answer to all the orange question or the pink questions there? The president. The answer to all of the red questions, I'll give you a minute. It's the Civil War. And the answer to all the blue questions, the Declaration of Independence. If you went to secondary school in the United States, you're likely familiar with names like Susan B. Anthony and Harriet Tubman. But for students who are unfamiliar with US history, and if they've never heard any of these names, which answer do you think they're most likely to remember or produce? She may be less well known, but Lucy Stone is the answer I'm going to teach beginners. If a student is familiar with one of the other names, they should practice the one they know. But if this is all new to them, I will teach the easiest option on the list. And yes, if you're wondering, there is a song about Lucy Stone. Here are some questions I'm taking liberties with. The first question doesn't ask, what was the precipitating event leading to the Great Depression? It asks, when? If you ask an average American, when did the Great Depression start? And she says 1929, is that answer correct or incorrect? It's the same if you ask me, what is Alexander Hamilton famous for? And I say, the Federalist Papers. Is that answer correct or incorrect? And here are a few more answers that I'm going to simplify for students. Teachers have asked me how much leeway examiners will give to students who don't produce the exact phrases as they're written in the official answer list. Keep in mind that there are well-educated native English speakers who take this test too, and many of them have never even looked at the official answer list. Are they going to fail if they give an answer that is factually correct, but phrased a little differently from the one on the official list? That seems unlikely to me. This is what the examiners have to follow in their own policy manual. An alien, they changed the word applicant to alien. Isn't that nice? An alien passes the civics test if he or she provides a correct answer or provides an alternate phrasing of the correct answer. I'm not sure that examiners will follow their own policy manual, but this is what it says. And if a student fails because the examiner didn't follow the policy, there's reason to challenge it with a supervisor or file an appeal. Now, as I've mentioned, the 2025 test brings some big challenges to students in terms of vocabulary that's difficult to say and difficult to remember. So I'm offering you my 8 tricks for helping students master them. I'm guessing that you're already using some of these strategies. You can use them all or just the ones you need. I'm going to demonstrate using the word representation. that appears in the question at the bottom of the screen. First of all, write the individual syllables up on the board. Mark up any silent letters or letters that are pronounced differently than what you might expect. And by the way, if you want a phonetic spelling of a word, you can find it in the Say It feature of my civics and literacy book. Model the word. Say the word slowly and clearly several times, enunciating each individual syllable as you point to it. As students repeat, take note of difficulties that they're having producing specific sounds. Exaggerate any sounds that students are having trouble with. You can stretch out that particular phoneme and say it louder. If possible, explain to students what they need to be doing with their lips, their tongue, their throat in order to produce that sound more accurately. If you hear errors in syllable stress, underline the accented syllable, and as you model the word again, emphasize that syllable by raising your voice or pounding the table or stamping your foot. Have students do the same thing as they repeat that word. In my class, the students think it's very funny when I stamp my foot on the accented syllable and they stamp their feet too. The next strategy is called a backward buildup, and I'm going to demonstrate that with Christy, if you would unmute.
I'm ready.
Okay, repeat after me. Shun,
Shun,
tation,
tation,
zentation,
zentation,
resentation,
resentation,
representation.
representation.
Thank you. That was a backward buildup. ESL teachers have been using this strategy forever, and I can't tell you why it works, but I can tell you it does work. Another strategy I use, I hold up my hand and I call out each syllable on my fingers. So you're sort of counting them out. Representation, and then have your students do the same thing. Another strategy is to lead a call and response sequence in a couple of ways. You can whisper the word and the students whisper it back. And then you shout the word and the students shout it back. You can clap your hands with each syllable. Students will do the same thing. You can pound your desk and the students will pound their desk as they say the word. You can stomp your feet with each syllable. You can pump fists in the air with each syllable. And if you want to add an extra element of fun, you can follow this exercise by calling on individual students and let them say the word in whichever way they want. The scientific way to say why this works is that physical activity creates stronger neural connections to boost retention. This is kinesthetic learning. And finally, assess whether students can say the word accurately. Call on each student individually to produce the word. Give a thumbs up or a compliment for accurate pronunciation. And if a student's unable to produce the word accurately, model it again, provide some quick coaching, and give the student a chance to say the word again. If they still can't say the word correctly, don't belabor the point. Just say okay and move to the next student. Some of the answers to the 2025 test use very complex phrasing, and I think that producing these answers is going to be the biggest challenge for students with the new test. I can only shorten them so much, so that leaves me with two options. One is to consider them throwaway questions. Students can get 8 questions wrong and still pass the test. I can focus on the questions that students can reasonably get right, and for the really tough questions, students can say, I don't know, let me try the next question. Or plan B, I can teach the tricky phrasing as a chant. I'll show you what I mean using the first phrase on the list here to more closely follow public opinion. I've eliminated the word more from the official answer to simplify that sentence. And then I use the 8 tricks that I just demonstrated to teach the words closely and opinion, because those are the ones I think students are going to trip over. Then I write the entire phrase on the board and I lead a word by word backward build up. And Christy, I'm going to ask you to unmute again and I'm going to demonstrate that.
I'm ready.
Repeat after me. Opinion,
Opinion.
public opinion,
Public opinion.
follow public opinion,
Follow public opinion.
closely follow public opinion,
Closely follow public opinion.
to closely follow public opinion.
To closely follow public opinion.
Thank you. Okay, now that's going to be pretty challenging for students, and you may have to do this a number of times. The next thing that I do is I ask students to repeat after me in a call and response style, and I make a chant for them to follow. It's like almost as if it were a song. I point and I tap on each word and I call it out, and the students call it back to me. So I'm going to demonstrate this last one with Patty, if you don't mind. I want you to imagine, sorry, Christy, whichever one of you. Imagine that, who's going to do this? Christy?
I got it.
Christy. Imagine she's a whole class of students chanting with me. And also keep in mind, I would go a lot slower if this was a real class. Opinion,
Opinion.
public opinion,
Public opinion.
follow,
Follow
public opinion,
public opinion.
closely,
Closely.
closely follow,
Closely follow.
to closely follow,
To closely follow.
public opinion,
Public opinion.
to closely follow public opinion.
To closely follow public opinion.
Okay, that that's challenging even for native speakers, but I think if you do enough of this kind of chanting, the students may be able to say these difficult phrases. Chanting is another mnemonic device, specifically rhythm and auditory mnemonics. It aids memory, of course, through repetition. So that's it for today. But before I take your questions, I want to leave you with some resource suggestions. Citizenship News is my blog. I post new developments whenever I think they might be useful for citizenship teachers to know about. For example, changes in the test or in the application process, and any new resources that might be useful to you. And you can sign up at citizenshipnews.us. New posts will automatically get sent to your email if you sign up there. Also, Echo Citizenship is a project that a few friends and I started. It provides free online professional development sessions for citizenship educators, and each month we host a 1 hour session with short peer-led presentations on various topics, followed by peer-initiated case study discussions. It's one of the only ways that citizenship educators around the country can network together and share ideas and challenges and get some encouragement from one another, which we certainly need right now. So I'm going to end it there, and I'm happy to take your questions at this point.
Thank you, Lynn, so much. I appreciate it. Well, we have plenty of time for questions, so go ahead and raise your hand if there's something you want to ask. You have a quite the expert with us, so let's take advantage. I see a couple people have unmuted. You're welcome to just chime in if you have something you want to ask. Yeah, Natalie?
Hi. I recently had a couple students who passed their test and they came in to talk to us about it. Both of them said that for the reading and writing part, for the reading, they were also asked to answer the question that they read, and I hadn't heard that before, but they both said they had to answer the question. Do you
It
know
wasn't
about
dictated
that?
to them?
They had okay, so they read the question and then they were told to answer it, which they did, but then the sentence was dictated to them after that.
Okay, so that examiner was not following the policy. That shouldn't have happened. Um, but if you're going to be teaching the literacy questions and answers, so the read aloud sentence that I told about earlier is actually a question,
Hmm.
and the dictation is always the answer to that question. It could be that the students are just getting confused about which is the literacy question and which is the civics test question. But when you're teaching those literacy questions and answers, the students are basically learning them anyway because you're practicing the dictation. So uh, even if they're not following the policy, it's probably not doing too much harm to the students.
Okay. Yeah, I hadn't heard that before, so I was kind of shocked when they
I hope
said,
that's not true.
I don't know. They both said it, so I don't know.
Wow. If you have some kind of policy advocates in your state that can bring this up to USCIS, that might be a good idea.
Okay. Thank you.
I've also experienced the same thing. I've had a number, and it's probably been at least in the last year that students are. I always ask when they pass the test, would they please come back to the class one more time and tell us their experience? And um, that is what I keep hearing is that they will read a sentence and then the tester will say, and this that's usually a question. And then the tester will say, okay, now write the answer. And there is no dictation.
They don't dictate the answer.
No.
Okay, then definitely you need to bump that up to your policy advocates. That is not following the official policy, and they can't just start a different policy without announcing it and frankly putting it in
Okay.
the Federal Register for comments. They can't
Okay.
do that.
And you said I contact who?
So I would know who to contact in my state.
No, no, I just mean what's the title?
Policy advocates, whoever that may be in your state.
Okay.
There is probably some legal immigrant rights group that can approach USCIS and that particular field office and point out that they're not following their own policy.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Christy, feel free if you see questions in the chat as well. Um, I'm just looking through here. So Laura Moyer, you had a question, interviews being scheduled and then canceled. Do you want to speak up and say more about that?
I've just heard that some students have said that, and this has been like within the last 4 or 5 months, where they had their citizenship interview scheduled, and then they got a notice saying that it had been canceled.
Yeah.
Just curious.
This is a really unfortunate development. USCIS announced that there are certain countries that they feel that the previous administration didn't properly vet the immigrants who were coming in from those countries. And so they want to re-vet them um, to make sure that they are not criminals or terrorists or who knows what. And they've declared that they're putting a temporary stop on all benefits for all applicants from certain countries. And it started out with that short list of countries that from the initial announcement of countries that were on the no travel list. And then they kept on adding countries, and we're up to 20 some countries that they have announced that they're not going to process any kind of benefits for until they can review their applications. So we are hearing about people being pulled out of naturalization ceremonies even because they happen to come from one of these countries. Theoretically, it's not permanent, but we're gonna have to see how it plays out.
Thank you. I'll just quickly answer Barbara's question. The slides are already in the participant folder, so I can drop the link to that, or maybe you already have it. So we've, made a PDF of those, and those are available on the links, of course, that Lynn has shared. So thank you. Something about, I wanted to bring up a question someone had that, oops, so many things coming in, I missed it. Moral character, somebody had a question about Kathleen O'Neill. Do you want to speak up and ask your question?
Yes, and first of all, Lynn, your presentation's been wonderful. Thank you so much. And like you, I just so enjoy teaching this class. It's so rewarding, but it's getting more difficult. Anyways, I had heard that, yeah, that some applicants have to show that they are of good moral character. They have to get a neighbor or someone to kind of verify that. And maybe that's related to this banned country question. I don't know. Have you heard anything about that?
Yes, can I clarify this? Have you heard of students actually experiencing this, or you've just heard that they're going to be doing this?
I just heard it. Yeah, I just heard it. None of my students have experienced that yet. No.
So there was an announcement that went out, I think mostly to intimidate people, but it said that they were going back to a policy from, I think that was back in the 50s or earlier, where they actually sent USCIS officers to the applicant's neighborhood to ask if this person had good moral character.
Mm.
We have heard of a couple of cases in California where somebody actually went to an applicant's neighbors and asked them not so much about the moral character, but about whether the person really qualified for a fee waiver or a disability waiver. I think that's what happened. Like somebody who was claimed to be disabled, are they really disabled? Or somebody said that they didn't have enough money to pay the fee and they were trying to determine, does this person work under the table? Or I don't know exactly what went down there. And who knows what they are going to do in the future. I can tell you that in my area, we have seen no such thing, and there would be quite a fuss if we did.
Okay, good. Let's hope that that is going to be the sentiment.
You know what I should add? In the interview book, Ready for the Interview, that red book, I am going to include some practice questions with this. Uh, I hate doing this, but I want students to practice answering the question, do you consider yourself a good person? And what have you done to help your community? And there's real stock answers to that. Like, I pay my taxes and I support my children, and you know what I'm talking about. I'm hoping that that will be good enough.
Great, thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
I want to back up a little bit. Leah, you had a great question. Feel free to come on mic if you like about how you might keep higher levels of English learners engaged as you use these strategies. And so I'm thinking you're envisioning a multi-level class. Is that right, Leah?
Yeah, exactly. In the past, when I've taught citizenship, it's been multi-level. So I'll have people at the very high ends of English, and then I'll have very low emergent readers and speakers. And I love everything that's in this presentation. And I question, though, if my higher level learners will stay engaged. And that's my question. If you have experience with that and how it's worked.
I refuse to teach emergent readers and very low level students with high level students, because what happens is the low level students drop out. But if you have to do that, I would say at certain points you're going to have to separate the class and give some kind of task, watch a video or um, do some written exercises with the higher level students and put all of your attention into teaching the low level students, because they're the ones who are at risk of failing the test. The high level students could actually self-prepare and probably pass this test. If you can get a volunteer, a teaching assistant you can have that person do some exercises with the high level students while you work with the beginners. That's my suggestion.
Thank you. John Schwartz, I know you had your hand up earlier. Let me know if you still have a question you'd like to ask. Other.
I was going to, hi, Patsy. So I'm John Schwartz with Literacy Minnesota. I was going to comment on the applicants, the neighborhood visits, and that issue, the good moral character. So I've been working with some local law profs here about that, and don't have final answers yet, but there is this idea of students getting affidavits, getting statements from various people to bring to the interview, employer, teacher, community groups, that sort of thing, and whether that would be helpful. The other thing is I am doing something that Lynn ended up saying she talked about doing, is I've been preparing learners past since late August to be prepared to give a statement that essentially is explaining why they would be a good citizen, why they are a good community member, and talking about things like work history, education history, being supportive of their children, any community volunteering they do, any community activity. So I haven't had learners come back saying they've had to use those sorts of statements yet, but I expect it. So I've incorporated that in my teaching, like Lynn sounds like she's doing too.
Yeah, thank you, John. I have heard people are putting together letters of reference or something for applicants to say that they are of good moral character. I know people are doing that. I'm not on the advice of the Immigrant Legal Resource Center. They said that until we find out exactly what policy this is and how, not what the policy, how they are going to operate with this policy, that it's not necessary to put together these letters. So I'm going to wait and see. And if I find out something that makes me think that it is necessary to send people in with letters, I'm going to put that on the Citizenship News website. So you can keep your eye on that. I am hearing from all of the immigrant rights national organizations on a monthly basis. Um, Anything new that I find out, I pass on to you.
Great, thank you. Christy, do you see anything you want to be sure and flag here?
Yeah, Hannah had a great comment question about loyalty in war, civil war, how it could be potentially re-traumatizing to some students, and wondering about mental health. Hannah, do you want to come on and say more about that?
Yeah, just acknowledging that if these questions are on the test, we have to teach them, and wondering the emotions that can bring up in a classroom setting, how you may deal with that, or how you may help students through the emotional aspect of those questions. Do you ever refer to mental health services? Do you ever bring in trauma, trauma-informed experts or anything like that? Also, just like, we have to connect things to real life for students. And I think so many of your strategies are, so excellent. But I'm curious if we've had students have strong emotional responses, if we've ever connected that to a real civil war that they went through. I work for a refugee resettlement agency. My students have always been refugee background. Um, yeah, so war trauma and trauma is just a very real part of my experience as an instructor for the last 14 years.
Thank you for that comment. this goes a little bit beyond the scope of my presentation. I was just going to present on the changes to the civics test, and I probably need to come back and do another presentation on getting people ready for the interview, but I will address this question. I also realized that some of the interview questions, not so much the civics questions, mostly the interview questions, can be very re-traumatizing. A lot of my students have been the victims of the very things they're being asked about. The way that I handle that in my books is to tell the story of a fictional person who committed this fictional human rights abuse, and to say that that person cannot become a citizen. And then I teach the question, and we can talk about what it means when we're talking about this fictional person instead of you. And another thing that I point out to people is that when they ask a question, have you ever been involved in, murders or recruiting child soldiers, or, this whole long list of horrible things that they ask about. Have you ever been involved in this? Not include, have you been the victim of these things? We've had clarification from legal people, and I pass that on to students. Involved in meaning, did you perpetrate this crime or human rights abuse? I don't have really good answers about this. We unfortunately have to sort of re-traumatize students in order to prepare them for the test. I hate that.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
thank you for going a little bit off topic in that way. I was just wondering if there's like, yeah, I think in asking a student to read someone else's story, if there's evidence to show that that will, like limit the PTSD response or something like that. Just wondering what, yeah, I'm just curious, what would a mental health expert, which we aren't, and here we are in front of our students and kind of being asked to navigate that. So anyway,
I
thank
will
you.
say that students know that there are hoops that they have to jump through, and they want it so bad, they'll put up with some trauma, unfortunately.
May I jump in and say something about this?
Sure, go ahead,
Just
Kate.
thank you. Hannah, I'm in your shoes. I also teach citizenship at a refugee resettlement center. Um, and I have, been doing this for a while, and I definitely have had to practice asking these questions, and I have definitely had students who um, got triggered in these questions. Unfortunately, I don't really think there is a way that act we can do it without talking about it. What I always do is before I go into it, I always tell the students, okay, we're going to talk about some sad questions now. If you need to take a break, go into the hallway, get some water, take care of yourself. Please do whatever you have to do for that. And then I just keep a really, really close eye on them while we're doing this. If it gets really, really touchy, maybe we can take a break. And then if they want to talk, I let them talk and I just let them say it. And even though I can't do a darn thing about what they've experienced, we can bear witness. And, you work with refugees, so much of what we do is just bearing witness. I hear
Mhm.
you. I believe you. This happened to you. And I'm so sorry that this happened to you. But I am so grateful you're here and you're safe. And we are going to do the absolute best we can for you.
Mm. Kate, that was an awesome response. I love it. And this is an example of the kind of discussions that we have on those eco citizenship sessions I was telling you about.
Yeah, thank you so much. We've had two people who've had their hands up a while. We're going to go to Lorna and then Silka. Lorna?
Oh, hi, thanks. I was just, I feel like these are such amazing materials and they could benefit students of all levels. And I just feel like, wow, is there sort of a temptation to just dummy it down for even higher English speakers so that they have the best opportunity to pass the test? And I was just wondering about your feedback about that and what kinds of levels you would use to, choose different materials.
Could you say that last part again? I didn't hear.
Like you have more than one material resource, and what is it clearly explicitly stated in your materials what levels they're intended for? reading.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so the main book that people use, the civics and literacy book, is for high beginners. The literacy book is for beginning literacy, very low. The interview book, Ready for the Interview, it's high beginning, low intermediate. It's the most challenging of them. Does that answer your question?
And when it comes time to actually going in for the test, their English skills, I mean, it just seems like, if you're having a hard time with the level that you were placed in, buy the book that's the dummied down version too. You know what I mean? Like it could help, right? For a student. I don't know. That's just my inclination to think, if it's going to be so much easier for them to pass, I just would like to give them that opportunity. But I realize it's kind of a complicated question because of different curriculum parameters and stuff like that. So
The the New Year's Press, my civics and literacy book is the easiest material you can find. It doesn't get any easier than that. If you want a more challenging textbook, you probably want to go with Voices of Freedom, Bill Bliss's book.
so you recommend it, your simplest one for all people studying for the test, kind of.
I recommend the civics and literacy book for everyone. Yeah.
Mhm. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lorna. Silka?
Okay, hi. Yep, I had a couple of months ago, I had one of my students go in for his interview, and he was higher level English. And he came back and talked to us about it and said he passed all the different parts, felt really good about it. And at the end, the officer looked at him and said, "So tell me, what can the Constitution do for you?" And he was so taken aback. He said he just answered, "I'm sorry, sir. I don't have an answer for that right now." And he had to come back. The
What?
guy flunked him right there. Has
Wh-
anybody ever had that
What
happen
does the
with their student?
Constitution do for you? Could you
Yeah,
say that again?
what can the Constitution do for you? Which, of course, is not in your book. It's not in, we use that in class, by the way. It's a great book. It's not on any study papers.
That was a rogue
So,
officer. That's not an official test question. They do
no,
sometimes
no.
ask about the oath. Do you understand the oath? What does it mean?
Right, right. And that
But
was at
what
the
does the
end for him
Constitution do
too.
for you? Wow. I
So
suppose he
we
was
have,
looking for answers from it gives me freedom of speech and it allows me to vote for elected
yep, I
officials.
have
I don't know, but I've never
we've
had a
we've
student ask
talked we've
that.
talked about that in class since, I said just in case it happens again. And we've come up with answers like I could vote, or I'm protected, I'm free. But yeah, anybody I've talked to before has never experienced that. So
The Constitution.
this was highly unusual, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you a story from the old days back in the 80s, before we started teaching citizenship with these Cambodian refugees. There was not 100 question list. They could ask pretty much anything they wanted. And one of the students was asked, "What is the Constitution?" And she'd studied all about it, but she didn't know how to answer that question. What is it? And they failed her. And later on, when I started figuring out how to teach citizenship to students, I learned that there's like this ritual answer. You're supposed to say the highest law. So that's what I taught them. But I just thought it's so bizarre that they would ask questions that it would kind of stymie an ordinary, native born American.
Well, thank you very much for your answer. So I was not wrong when in thinking that just should not have happened.
No, and somebody should have taken that up with the field office that allowed that sort of thing.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah,
I'm
thank
just
you.
kind of going through the chat to see, Christy, anything you flagged that you want to be sure and return to?
I feel like we've got most of the stuff in the chat.
Okay. Are there additional questions? We just have a few more minutes, but I bet we could get to one or two more questions. Anyone else want to raise their hand and jump in? We have someone who's asking, how can we find the person who interviewed our student? Is that a thing?
The students are supposed to be given a results checklist that says which part of the test they passed, which part they didn't, and that should have the officer's name on it.
Okay. All right, that's all. And then Barbara has her hand up. Barbara?
Sorry, I was muted. Your presentation is amazing. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Are the citizenship schools classes free to the students? And I'm sure they're not free. Somebody's sponsoring them. Who's sponsoring the courses? What organization or program?
Who are you asking?
Lynn.
We're a public library. Not allowed to charge for anything.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So most of my services are one-to-one. That's just because we don't have the kind of numbers that we could put together for classes. We tried and it was difficult. So we work one-to-one, and that allows us the flexibility to offer the service whatever time and location works for everybody. And also it helps because the students are at all different points in the application process. And it's difficult when you have students coming in the middle, or they already have their interview and they drop out. So one-to-one helps. I do teach a class. It is the only class offered at the library, and it's for elderly beginners.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Anyone else before we close? Jill, Ashley, you're asking, am I understanding correctly that there is a new passing the test book for the 128 question test?
Yeah, the new civics and literacy book. It looks just like the slide you're looking at. That has all of the new questions in it. It's just come out. I found out this morning from the publisher, we're already in the second printing.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah, I
exciting.
was surprised about that one.
Well, it shows there's quite a demand, I guess, right?
It's
I guess,
encouraging, but so much funding has been cut already, and citizenship teachers is still providing classes for students, and students are still brave enough to go to their interviews. So I'm happy to hear that.
right. Well, I really appreciate it. And Astrid, if you're here, one of the questions that I kind of have is Astrid is our professional development specialist at the State Department of Education. I'm curious, let me come on camera, what kinds of things would be helpful for us as professional development people who provide that and have our Atlas library and put on conferences like this? What would be helpful to the field here? So I'd love for people to either put in the chat or speak up just in the time we have remaining. What is it that we can do? Astrid and I and other supplemental service providers who are able to gather resources, put on workshops, like what other topics or things would be helpful to you all as you're navigating this? We know it's a really difficult task to prepare students for this, and it just keeps getting more and more challenging. So, your guidance would be helpful. I am not currently in the classroom doing this work. So, yeah, specifically to citizenship too is what I'm thinking. Laura says, I think it would be great to have a place where citizenship teachers could get together every few months to share what they're experiencing. That's a great idea.
I'm giving you that place. It's that Citizenship Echo project.
Okay, can we drop that link again? Christy, thank you. Heather asks, although examiners must adhere to an objective standard, is there any anecdotal evidence of quotas being imposed on them? Do you know?
Is there any evidence of
Any
what?
evidence of quotas being imposed on them? I imagine that means you must fail so many students or pass so many students.
Oh my God. No, that would just be inconceivable.
Mm,
We try to keep an eye on the numbers of students who pass and fail, and it's really interesting to see how that differs from one field office to another.
mm.
But that's a different thing.
Great, thank you. And Christy has dropped that echo information again. And John says a local forum of educators to share info from applicant experiences, legal advice, etc., would be helpful. And I will say we did reach out to USCIS, and it seems like that department has shrunk considerably as far as their education. Can you say a little bit? What do you know, Lynn?
It's
Everyone we
it's
knew
not
that
there
used to work
anymore.
there
There
and
used to
present for
be an
us.
Office of Citizenship, and
Okay.
there's nobody working in it now.
Yeah. Everyone I reached out to was no longer there. So.
There are a few community relations officers still in different regions, and some of them are more responsive than others. But the Office of Citizenship that put out all these great resources and used to go to different communities and do trainings, all gone.
Yeah, they used to come to our summer institute every year too, a couple guys, yeah. Yeah, a lot has shifted. Well, we are almost at time. Yeah, they used to come to us, Astrid. That's right. And they're like, can we come to your conference? Sure. So, any other questions or comments before we just show Lynn our thanks in the chat? Kathy had to get off the email list, huh? What was
I
going on in there,
guess
Kathy?
I kind of have a general question about, I taught citizenship, before it was changed to more than 100 questions. And I was wondering if all of the different materials that are out there, you know, um, have been updated on the website for our school. And then, well, I mean, just for the US, I forget the initials, but are all the materials updated everywhere now for the new tests, or is it hard to find material because of the changes?
Are you asking about published materials? Are you asking about informational websites? What
Yeah,
specifically?
I guess there was one website in particular that was so phenomenal, and um, I thought it was, I don't know. I'm sorry. I guess I'm not sure what I'm asking.
The
When was
USCIS had a website that used to be kind of
yeah
useful. It was the Citizenship Resource Center, and it
yeah
had lesson plans and all kinds of information, translations of questions. They took it all down.
oh
You don't see
really?
that anymore. They post the official question list, a few other things up there, but not the really great helpful information that used to be up there.
Okay, that's what I was referring to. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, deep breaths, everybody. That's a big task you're all doing, and I'm so grateful for everyone who's doing this work and grateful to Lynn for joining us with all of the great advice that she has and, of course, the materials she has to offer as well. If you can join me in thanking her in the chat or with those fun emojis, and we'll let you get off to your next session. The next sessions begin at 11:15. Christy has dropped the flyer and a copy of the flyer in case there's too much traffic on that first one. You have a bit of a break here, and thank you, Lynn, for joining us. And good luck navigating all that snow on the East Coast. We appreciate you. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye. And someone said they tried to order the book, but it's not available yet. You said in the next month or
It
so?
isn't, it's shipping.
Oh, it is shipping. Okay.
Yep.
They must have hit the wrong link or something. All right. There's just a handful of people still here.
Can you put a link then that that works for buying the book? Because I was looking at it too. Look, I was trying to get a book too. Is
I'm
there
looking
one
at
that's
the pro literacy website. Is that your best bet?
yeah, I just looked at that too, but I just didn't if that's the one that didn't work. I didn't put a credit card number in, but I just wondering to which one works well
New
to
Readers Press Com.
Yeah, let me put it in the chat here. This is where, and this is to the whole series. And forgive me, which is the newest one? The civics and literacy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's looks like it's available just fine. Let me know if you have trouble, but that looks to be working.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You were
You
awesome.
bet.
Thanks for everything you do. Thank you guys. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye. All right, let me just pull the chat up here. Anyone still here that has a question before we close? Well, then this was wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and close the recording.